everyone, welcome back to Reading with Tatiana. Today I'm doing my book review on Against the Loveless World by Susan Abulhawa. I'm sorry if I said your last name wrong. And this book is a 5 out of 5. If I could give it a 10 out of 5, I would. And it's actually one of the first books for my 2022 books I've read so far that I'm looking forward to reread again in the future. So this is a must read for me. A new segment I've added to my book reviews is I want to do a Booktubers Shoutout. So if you have the time to check out my booktube friend, Kelly Reads a Lot, I'm going to also link her channel down below. I love her channel. She's also a very new booktuber. She's very positive. She's always smiling. She does to be read. She does hauls. She does reviews. And I love her reviews because unlike mine, they're really short and condensed, so they're really easy to watch. And I just can't help but feel a bit happier when I watch her reviews just because she's very cheery. So if you have some time to add a booktuber to your YouTube, please check out her channel down below. Before I get into my full review, I would always appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button, if you gave this video a thumbs up, and if you want to leave a comment if you read this book or any of other Susan's works, or if you have any feedback for me on my channel, as I am a new booktuber still, I would say, I'm always open to feedback. This review will also be spoiler free just because it was a 5 out of 5 for me. So I really want you guys to see this review, be intrigued, and read it for yourself. I'm going to start, as always, talking a bit about the author. So Susan's parents are both refugees that were affected by the 1967 war in Palestine when Israel captured what remained of Palestine. So this book really, even though it's fictional, I believe it really covers a lot of Susan's experience with her parents and her family and the Palestinian diaspora. This book for me was really good because in the news you always hear about Palestine versus Israel and everything that's happening. But as someone who grew up in Canada, and Canada has always been Canada, it's really hard for me to imagine why there's a fight over his territory. How come, depending where you are in the world, what you see is Israel and what's Palestine. So this book was really good because it really, I guess, with the characters and seeing their struggles and they're moving between countries all the time and what impacted that, it really talked about or gave me like a perspective of what's happening to Palestinians around the world. I tangented a bit there, but I feel because this topic is very heavy and it was really eye-opening for me to learn, I'll probably do that a lot during this review. So her parents are both refugees from Palestine. At the time, her father was deported and her mother was actually studying abroad in Germany and she couldn't return to Palestine. So they had to reunite in Jordan and then ultimately move to Kuwait. From what I read from this book, I understand that Kuwait, even though they're neighboring countries, Kuwait had better standard of living, whereas Jordan had a lower standard of living. However, in both countries, Palestinians, refugees, or immigrants that were able to flee and create lives and businesses in these new countries, they were kind of treated as second-class citizens. So I think Susan really draws on that from her experience. One thing I thought that's really interesting as well is, on top of her childhood being very turbulent between moving to Kuwait and then her parents moving to the US and Jordan and Palestine and, all that going back and forth, she actually moved to an orphanage in Jerusalem. And then she was there for 3 years until age 13. And then she was expelled for not having a proper documentation. So this book talks a lot about the importance of having the proper documents, which isn't always recognized or attainable. So she was kicked out of the orphanage because she didn't have the right paperwork to be an orphan in this orphanage. However, it's really an unfortunate situation because her family history actually traces back to the two villages dating back to the 1st century, which is pretty crazy that she wasn't recognized and to live there, which is like really unfortunate. One thing I found really inspiring about Susan is that she moved to the US at 13. She lived with her father shortly before she moved into a foster home where she moved around quite a bit, and then at the age of 17 she emancipated herself and she finished high school, college, and graduate school on her own. She is a author, obviously, but she also is a activist for Palestinians across the world. So I find that she's very inspiring because she had very a traumatic and turbulent childhood and upbringing, but she really made a space for herself and made a voice for people like her and her people who are struggling. So I really love Susan's life story. To add to my huge crush on Susan, she also started a NGO, which stands for non-government organization, called Playgrounds for Palestine, where they fundraise money and build playgrounds for children in Palestine and also in refugee camps in Lebanon, which I think is amazing because for me personally, when I travel to especially developing countries, it really makes me sad when I see kids not having the childhood that I was very so privileged to have in Canada. And I think it's so important that even kids that are affected by war or displacement in refugee situations, that they have a space to play and be kids. So I love that she has this organization that she started. I also want to add on top of all these amazing things she does for Palestine that before she became an author, she actually worked in the biomedical science field and she was a researcher for a pharmaceutical company. Against the Loveless World is her third novel. She's actually written 2 previous novels. The first one is called Mornings in Jenin, which is translated to 32 languages and sold over 1 million copies. Her second novel is The Blue Between the Sky and Water, and it was translated to 19 languages before its release and was published in 2015. All her novels, including Against the Loveless World, follows characters that are Palestinian and also how they were affected by the Israel-Palestine conflict and how their lives changed after they left Palestine. And in this case, in Against the Loveless World, our protagonist actually returns to Palestine as well. So I really like how, if you're someone like me who hears about all these buzzwords in the news about Palestine and Israel, but don't really know what's going on, if you're like me, it really helps to read stories, even though they're fictional, because if I read these stories, it helps me kind of understand the situation there more. So I really recommend Susan as an author, and I'm definitely going to add her 2 other books to my to be read list. I would say though it is a heavy read, so you probably want to take a break in between with some lighter books. But yeah, Susan is great, and I definitely recommend her books. Earlier I mentioned that her last book was published in 2015. Against the Loveless World was published in 2020, and I would say the genre of this book is historical fiction. Even though all the characters are fictional, I don't doubt that Susan drew from stories of family and friends that she had to write this story. So I would call this historical fiction. Now I'll talk a bit about the story to give you a reference point for what the story is about, because I did say it's quite a dark read. So the story starts with we meet Yakut or Nahar. She also goes by Almas. She has 3 different names, and in the book she kind of talks about why she has 3 different names throughout her life and how she chooses to give her name depending on the relationship with that person. So we meet Yakut, I will call her that because that is her first name, and she is Palestinian. She's very young, and she marries quite young too. But then her husband abandons her, and in this culture, it's kind of looked down upon when you're a divorced woman, especially you're young. So then Yakut is forced to become an escort. She's recruited by Barak, and becoming an escort, she meets lots of different men. She meets a lot of different people. She actually gets displaced out of Kuwait, which is where the story started. She was in Jordan for a bit, and then she has an opportunity to return to Palestine. And throughout her journey of becoming an escort and meeting people in Kuwait, Jordan, and Palestine, she actually gets not recruited, but I guess like roped in or having the opportunity to become a radical political prisoner as deemed by Israel. So as you can see, the story has so many shifts and changes, and I don't want to do any spoilers, but if I'm saying that this story starts with a young Palestinian woman in Kuwait, but it ends with her being deemed as a radical political prisoner in Israel, you're kind of wondering what were the pieces that were in between. So this book, the premise is very intriguing, and it's quite a good read. The novel is really good too because, like my last book, The Paris Library, there is a bit of a dual timeline in the sense that the story starts with Yakut being a prisoner in the Cube in Israel, and she kind of recounts her every moment in her life that led her up to being in this Cube prison. So I really like the dual timeline because you get a bit of perspective and her internal thoughts on actions in her life before. In addition to following Yakut's life story, it's really cool because she has her brother, her mother, her grandmother. She has her ex-husband's brother Bilal. She has Barak, the woman who recruited her to become an escort. Also their stories and how they're affected as being a Palestinian or being friends with a Palestinian, and also how them being Kuwaiti or Jordanian affects their lives as well. And it's just so complex because, like I have no exposure to this area of the world, and it's just crazy to think how this area operates and just how you have to be really careful who you're friends with and how that could impact you as a person in society. So this book was really good because even though Yakut is the main character, we really learn about what it means to be a mother, a grandmother, or what it means to be a brother or a single man, and how there's like certain things you need to fall into his culture. So this book was just like very eye-opening for me to read. This book, I feel, has so many themes that you could talk about, but ones that really spoke out to me is, as I mentioned quite a bit already in my review, is the Palestinian diaspora or the refugee diaspora in the Middle East. And, this book, I think, gives you a really good context of what it means to be Palestinian, to grow up there, to not be able to return to your country, and also that even when you're able to return, because in this book, it covers when the Oslo Accord came into place, so everyone that was Palestinian was able to go back there. When you go back, it's not really home because it's been affected by war. It's still not really home because you're being martyred by Israelis, and there's always like this feeling of you're the other. So like even when you can go back home, it kind of talks about like what's the idea of home and where is home. Clearly, as we always learn in stories, that home is where the heart is. Home is who you're with. But it's interesting to see that they finally get to go home, but it just doesn't feel quite right. Other common theme, because Yakut does become an escort, is it talks a lot about what it means to be traditional or to be modern, and if there is one over the other, or is it possible to have a balance. So my favorite example in this book, because I don't want to give too many spoilers, this one isn't really a spoiler, is her mother is very talented at hand sewing traditional dresses for Palestinian culture, and she will embroider these very intricate patterns on wedding dresses and make a lot of money. However, later in the book, her mom gets a desk job, and it's just an office job, it's nothing special, but her mom's like, oh, look at me, I have an office job. And you can see that even though her talent is so much more culturally special and very like coveted in fashion design, the mother really emphasizes the importance of being a working office woman having a desk job. So it's very interesting to see the different perspectives, because I would feel like, for me, I would be very impressed if someone did something traditional with garments versus someone just working in an office, because I work in an office and it's nothing special. Last theme I want to touch on is this book really showed me what does the good guys mean, especially in the war, because I think about how growing up, I was like 10, 11 when the war on Iraq happened, and like we always on the news was told that the Middle East, these terrorists are the bad guys. I'm not saying they're the good guys, but this book really shows that there are really two sides to every story, and the good guy is really whoever's telling the story. So for me, growing up in Canada, my media was America. So for me, I experienced that America were the good guys, and they're going to punish the bad guys. But this book does the other side. So like we see there's characters who slowly become the radical political prisoners. But like, why did it become that way? It wasn't like just overnight, and they had reason to, because they were kind of forced to fight back, to take back what's theirs. And taking back what's yours is also so subjective depending which side you're on. So this book made me really think about, when you hear stuff in history, you really have to think about who's saying it and who they want to convince that they're the good guys or the bad guys, because no one ever is going to say like, I'm the bad guy, right? So that was a really prevalent theme in the book. So things I didn't like, and I'll be honest, because this book was a 5 out of 5 for me and I want to reread it again, I can't really think of anything that I didn't like. The only things I didn't like, but it's part of the story and you just have to accept it because it builds character, is just all the experiences that Yakut had when she was an escort. It's just really awful, but I think it was important to the plot just to show how awful her life was and how many shitty things she had to deal with. So other than that, to be honest, the book was great. It didn't feel like it dragged. There were like lots of characters, but it didn't feel like any characters didn't need to be there. I felt they were all important. It didn't feel like they had any they didn't feel like they rushed to get to a certain plot point. Like, my previous book, Paris Library, I felt like the author had an end in mind, and she was having a good book, doing a good plot, and at the end she's like, oh shoot, I gotta wrap it up. Where this book, it didn't feel like that at all, and I just want to keep going. So I have no bad things to really say about this book for the author. I have lots of things I like to say about what I liked about this book. So the first thing I want to start with was because this book is set in a foreign place in the world. Many times when I've read books set in especially the Middle East, they will use words I'm not familiar with, and I'll have to Google it, or you can kind of guess what it is based on the context. But this book, what I really like is that Susan actually had a glossary, and it's several pages, and it's really good because it has the word and it has the description as well, and a definition. So that was really helpful while I read the book. Like, I flipped back so many times, and there are even some words that I don't think she used, but I think she added in because they're common things that are part of Palestinian culture. Other things I enjoy in the book is it kind of gives me the idea of like being resilient. So one quote I want to say, it's on page 114 at the bottom. It's when Yakut talks about how her family is uprooted from Kuwait and have to move to Jordan. And she says how it amazed me to see how quickly they, her mom and grandma, got comfortable in a new apartment and settled into a routine, as if their lives had simply been excised and replanted elsewhere, intact, with just a dusting of grief they shook off before returning to a business of living. And I just really love that quote because it makes me think about whenever I read books about stories like memoirs about refugees or people that have been displaced. I always think how it's so inspiring and like so amazing they were able to survive and push through that hard time in their lives. But this quote made me realize like a lot of times people don't choose to have a tough life. I think if anyone had the choice, they want to have a life that they have a lot of like daily comforts. They want to family and friends to be happy, and it just reminded me that lots of refugees or people who struggle don't choose to have a tough life, and when they do struggle, they're not going to complain because they're just focusing on surviving and just pressing through until they can have comfort again. So that quote like really resonated with me, and this book has so many moments like that that made me just feel very appreciative of what I have, and just make me really learn more about the struggle if you are a displaced person, which is a really unfortunate situation. Other thing I really enjoy about the book is during the time where this book is set, Yakut gets exposure to the internet. And for me, I grew up with no internet. And then when I was like 5 or 6 years old, my family got like an at-home computer. But it had like maybe like 4 applications, and all I could play was like solitaire or free cell. So I did live life without internet, but I have internet most of my life. And for me, it's like without a thought. Like, I know how to use the internet. So it's really cool to read Yaku's experience when she learns how to go to an internet cafe, how to pay for internet, how to make an email, how to send an email, and just having her reaction to how immediate the internet is. And it just makes me again appreciative for living in a time in a world when things are so modern and so connected, and how things are so easy. And it just reminds me to not take things for granted because it wasn't always like this. So I really enjoyed that aspect of the book, just seeing Yakut's reaction to the development of the internet. Other quote I want to share, it's near the bottom of page 138, is when the mother talks about how back when she was younger, you were able to take a bus to Jerusalem, or you could take a train straight to Beirut or Damascus, which I believe is in Syria, or Cairo even, which is in Egypt. The world was open. And again, this book kind of touches back on what I said earlier about how it reminds me to be grateful, because you never know when you can stop doing something. Like, I live in Canada, and right now I feel very safe because I can travel basically anywhere in the world. And luckily at the top of us there's nothing really, and the south is America. But if I live somewhere else, like, things can just change that overnight, and you lose that freedom of movement. And I think a lot of us experienced that during COVID during the past few years. So this book just made me appreciate that, and that quote resonated with me because when I traveled to Vietnam several years ago, I met a older lady who's a solo traveler, and she was saying that in the 70s she was able to travel in the Middle East and she didn't have to worry about anything. But now, like, we don't really have that option to go to the Middle East, or if you do, it's not that as free as it used to be. So just really appreciate what you can do right now, because you don't know when that might change in the future. On Goodreads, this book got an average of 4.42 out of 5 stars, which, as you know from my previous reviews, that I really believe that any book that got an average over 4 is a good read. So I just wanted to share a bit about why people didn't like the book at first, and also then after I'll share why people like it. So reasons why people didn't like it, and I can see how they would have this opinion, but I don't necessarily agree with it, is they felt this book was anti-Semitic, which means like anti-Judaism, which I can see how it is because the book talks about a lot about Yakut, her family, and how they want to take their land back from Israelis and take Palestine back from Israel. So I can see why it has that impact or that effect on readers, but I don't think that's what the author Susan is trying to do. I think she's just telling perspective of these characters and why they aren't supportive of Israelis. Other common bad feedback I saw was that people felt a lot of the plot points were shocking on purpose, and it's not really close to reality. And I don't, like I said, this story is fictional. I'm sure Susan fluffed up some parts of the story, but I don't think it was she did it with a shock factor on purpose. I think everything she did drove the overall plot, so I definitely disagree with that negative review. Very positive reviews on Goodreads, and this is just preaching to the choir because I gave it a 5 out of 5 because they felt the book was unapologetic, haunting, epic, powerful, harrowing, and I agree with all of that. Like, this book I couldn't really put down, except sometimes I did because it was just a bit heavy. I just need to process it, but it's just overall a great book, and I hope you have time or have a chance to read this amazing book. Why I think you should read this book, as I mentioned before, the top reason I think you should read this book is if you're like me, who has heard about Palestine and Israel and the Gaza Strip and all that kind of conflict and stuff, but don't really understand it. This book I think is great for that, and also to understand the Palestinian diaspora, because if you're like me, you've probably heard there's Palestinians that was in Syria, in Kuwait, in Jordan, and Iran, and it's like, why are they all over? It doesn't really make sense. So this book is really great for that. Another reason you should read this book is to see a different perspective of America and its role and involvement in the Middle East over the decades, because if you're like me, a Canadian, you probably have only seen the American side of it, so it's very interesting to see the other side of it as well. And the third reason I think you should read this book is if you want to learn more about stories in faraway places, especially the daily lives of how war impacts individuals. And those are my top 3 reasons on why you should read this book. Now I'm going to share how this book made me feel, because as always, I love to ask people how a book made them feel, because if you ask me in a week, a year, 5 years what the book was about, I probably won't remember the little details, the characters, or that kind of stuff. However, with this book, I'll probably remember the plot quite a bit. But I always remember how a book made me feel. So this book, it made me feel very grateful. Just reading a cute story in her life and all the things she had to push through in her life and all the struggles she had, it's made me reflect on my life and how I'm so privileged to be born in Canada, and how I never really had to be worried for my life. So this book made me very grateful, and yeah, like, I'm looking forward to reading it again in the future. It's definitely going to be going back to my TBR. Alright, so that's my book review for Against the Loveless World by Susan Abulhawa. If you read this book, I would love to hear what you thought. Was it a great read, like a 5 out of 5 like me, or was it just an okay read and you weren't a big fan? I'd love to hear your reasons why you liked it, and also reasons why you didn't like it. If you want to join me for my next book, I pick a young adult fiction because I just needed a bit of an easy read and a break. You probably heard of his author. He also wrote The Fault in Our Stars. I'm reading his following book called Turtles All the Way Down. It's been a pretty good read so far. It's a young adult's book, so I find the characters a bit unrelatable, but I feel a bit nostalgic because I feel like if I read this book when I was younger, I probably would have related a lot to the protagonist. Thank you for watching my book review. I always appreciate it. And again, if you can subscribe, hit the thumbs up, and leave a comment, I'll always appreciate it. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.